Hi, and welcome to the Blurry Turtle Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by sleep deprivation. So, only day 2, and I'm already crashing. It's good times. No complaints though, a lot of good tennis, a lot of big upsets today. Sabalenka, survives unscathed. Branstein played well in the second set, but I really do like that Sabalenka can turn it up when she needs to. She won in 2, plays Buskova. Not really a huge issue there. Buskova is going to make her play a lot of balls, but she's not really that good on grass. She beat Sun 4-4, which is a solid win, but I watched a bit, and Sun she's having trouble redirecting the ball on her backhand and her forehand. Honestly, it just feels like a fitness and strength issue. Not that she lacks it, but more of that makes it easier to drive the ball. I feel like her opponent's weight of shot is bothering her right now. So I don't think the slump is going to end until she kind of makes some moves there. Raducanu and Vondrousova, pretty close on paper. I think, I don't know if Raducanu has the rally tolerance to beat Vondrousova. Vondrousova is playing really well right now and just beat Kessler, who I think Kessler also would be a problem for for Raducanu. So I like Vondrousova's side there. I think she's going to be a really tough match for Sabalenka when she gets there. She has potential to win this tournament again the way she's playing right now. She really is just devilish on grass court. Just everything is hit with purpose. Everything is hit with some funky spins. She has good variation in her shots. She moves well. Knows when to use a moon ball. She can lob the ball, drop. And it's just nothing missing there. And lefties just serve way more effectively on grass. Mertens and Lee. Really impressed by Lee hitting through Golubic. I thought it was a simple match, but I watched a lot of it, and Golubic's slices on grass are really, really difficult to deal with. So for a player like Lee, who loses to her unforced errors, to stay locked in and beat her, that's a big win. I think she can be effective against Mertens. I don't think she can win. Mertens is a similar defensive test as Golubic, but she has a lot more power, and she's serving well right now. So I think Mertens can win that in 3. Sasnovich playing well, great win against Gracheva, but the head-to-head against Svitolina is promising, but not great. Sasnovich won, but the wins were back in 2021. One was in 2023, but that was on clay, and I feel like Svitolina was just back on tour at that point. So I think Svitolina's gonna beat her pretty convincingly here. Sasnovich will serve well. Maybe I shouldn't say convincingly, but I think Svitolina has a little bit larger of a game than her. Bolter with a big win. Her and Badosa really could have gone either way. Just a rough service game for Badosa at the end. Bolter should beat Sierra. I'm really impressed with a couple things from Sierra because she's mostly a clay courter. She serves well when with good power when she goes wide from the deuce side. It's not just a big kick serve. It's very flat and powerful. And also just her hitting is really strong off both wings. I feel like the base is there for her to get very good on other surfaces, and she moves well too. So, for a player who's just coming out of the juniors, that's a good thing. I think Bolter's serve and aggression will beat her, but she does have a bright future, and everybody loves to have a bright future. Buksha pulled off the upset. I kind of wrote her off, so I feel silly. She actually had some good success against Vekic also. She went to 3 with her in Nottingham about a season ago, so I think this might be sneakily close here. Vekic was really good in the first round, so I think she'll win. But it's hard to write off a player after they pull an upset, So Vekic in 3 might be possible. Fernandez took care of the junior standout Klugman. Straight sets. Siegemann, got a boost from Stearns. Stearns is just not really looking to play long rallies on grass. A lot of errors. Maybe she is looking to play long rallies and it's just not working out. It takes time to get used to grass, and the season is short, so not a great reason to train for it if your strengths are elsewhere. And she's definitely a hard court specialist at this point. Yeah, I like Fernandez to outlast Siegemann. She has, the rally tolerance. They have similar approaches as far as wanting to outlast their opponent, and Fernandez is a bit faster and, a bit younger. So I like her side there. Keys and Danilovic. Keys going 3 close sets with Ruse is not concerning because they played a close match last time. Ruse actually threw up during the match, so the heat is really messing with some people. I just think Danilovic is going to have an easier time scoring on Keys. I'm expecting the same match as Osaka-Danilovic, where, Keys and Danilovic have similar offenses, and Danilovic just being a little worse on defense probably will cost her the match. So I'm expecting Keys in 3 there. I really don't. Maybe she levels up after the last match, but she didn't look automatic there at all, and she didn't look flawless on defense either. So, as far as the throwing up thing, a handful of people have gotten nauseous because of the heat. Musetti said he had a stomach virus. I've also seen a bunch of players coughing more than kind of makes sense. So there's a decent chance something is going around at Wimbledon. Players are not going to admit that, but it seems like there's some sort of illness in the air. Paolini Rakimova should be good. Paolini, really was struggling against Sevastova's variety, but she wore her down. Midway through the third set, I think Paolini broke and Sevastova just looked exhausted. Sevastova broke back, but she only won 3 games from there. Paolini just really solid. She has a couple ways to beat you. She does hit the ball big enough to hit through you, and she moves incredibly well and has good stamina. So I think her and Rakimova will be close, but I think Paolini has more variety, a little bit faster on defense. So I think it'll be hard for Rakimova to score there. Noskova's playing great. Ava Lise with the big win. I think Noskova can hit through her. I don't think Lisa's serve is big enough to keep her safe. So I like Noskova's side there. Big, heavy forehand, and flat ground strokes. And she's, she played well last week. She'll keep it going here. Haddad and Sramkova had about 400 lead changes. It was stressful. I wasn't even watching most of the match. I was watching the score, and it was stressful. Dart and Galfi was pretty similar, very close. Could have gone either way. Dart just kind of lost her forehand technique late in the match, and Galfi has a lot more power. So once Galfi locked in, it was easier for her to score points at the end. And Dart was really looking to earn errors, which is fine. But when you lose your power and you lose your depth, it's just, it's hard for your opponent to miss when they recognize, as Galfi did, that Dart was not really going for anything. So good win for Galfi. I think Haddad can outlast her. Haddad has been really almost consistent. She's been clinical about her serve. She's been, working drop shots well. She can defend well. She's just overall a little bit better than Galfi. And Galfi has the power and forehand to hit through her, but I don't think for a whole match. So I think Haddad wins that in 2 or 3. Anisimova is zipping people. I actually forgot to change my draw, and I think I have her winning. I was going to, maybe just have her with a semifinals run, but glad to see her shutting people out. She's playing really well, and this is another good draw for her. Zarazua is not a big threat, so Anisimova should probably win in 2 lopsided sets again. Schneider with a solid win. Her and Parry should be pretty close. Sometimes I feel like Schneider is scheduled to get a good win, and her stamina will cost her. So Parry will have a decent, like a 30%, if I'm making up random numbers, chance of winning this match. I think Schneider should win, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wound up in the 3rd set because Parry's playing well, and Schneider can miss sometimes. She's not going to back off her offense either. So if you're rushing her, you're going to earn errors. Jabeur, unfortunately, had some breathing problems. Like I said, she's having some fitness issues. It's making it tough for her to really get any traction on tour. Tomova, plays Cartel. Cartel, just a bigger offense at this point, I think. Maybe a bit stronger. Not maybe. She is stronger physically. And she did beat Ostapenko, which is, it's a big win. I think Cartel keeps it going, especially with the home crowd. That should be a good spot for her. Tomova's really playing mostly with her forehand in this one, and I think Cartel's forehand's a little bigger. Kruger and Pavs should be a great one. I like Pavlyuchenkova's side there. I think she's a little bit more wily, I guess. Just generic veteran terms to just throw out in the most cliched way. I don't know why I did that, but I do feel like she moves the ball a little better than Kruger. Kruger could win. Kruger, again, is a player who her ceiling is very high. And if she locks into that, she can blow a player like Pavlyuchenkova off the court. But she has to lock into that for the whole match. And I think, I don't know, I think just Pavs has more experience and is a little more consistent. She also hits the ball heavy herself. So, if someone's going to frustrate Kruger into some errors, it definitely could be her. Osaka and Siniakova should be close. I think Siniakova can win that. It's a tough one. Osaka is better. She moves a little better. She serves way better. Siniakova moves the ball well, though. It's a little better on defense. So it's really about Osaka trying to figure out how to keep her unforced errors down. She's good from behind. Osaka really is a player who locks in once you get up. She does the work. When she's on serve, sometimes she can kind of look for her best game. It's not really a heat check. It's just a matter of, she feels like there's no pressure, so she wants to hit the right shot, but the right shot is something that she's not really executing perfectly yet. She's not completely back to where she was before she took a break from the tour to have a child. That makes this close. And Siniakova did just beat Zhang, who not really the best on grass, but it's a similar level win at this point to Osaka. Zhang's swings are very big, so grass, cuts off her time a little bit. She's having some neck issues also, which, makes it, it makes it a lot harder to serve your way through a match when you don't really want to move your neck that sharply. I like Siniakova there in 3. If Osaka's going to win, I think it has to be in 2. Andreeva should beat Bronzetti. Nice section of the draw for her here, playing players who are much better on clay. Bronzetti hits big enough to give Andreeva trouble, but doesn't really serve that great. Not really the best on grass. Baptiste and Mboko, I'd skip it if I could. I'm excited to watch it. It's an interesting matchup. Mboko moves a bit better, defends a bit better, but Baptiste's offense is unreal when she's playing well. She can just take the racket right out of your hand. So great win against Magdalena Freck for Mboko. Really bright future. I think she'll keep getting better because it's another player where the base is there. There are no big technical issues with her game. She serves well. Great athlete. I think at this point Baptiste is just a little bit able to score easier though. So I think she'll win in 2 or 3. Grass is an offensive game more than anything, especially when the offense is consistent, which I think Baptiste really found her best level after the first set against Cristea. So that also is a good sign to me, when there's more in the tank, both mentally and physically, to turn up the game and also stay at that level until it's over. Krejcikova Dolehide should be tricky. I have a hard time with Dolehide matches because I can picture her missing shots that she shouldn't. But I also have seen her bounce serves over people's head. She has one of the best kick serves on tour. One pretty lopsided straight set match. I don't know if I like Krejcikova's returning against her. One of the things about Ayala's game is that she doesn't really have a big first serve. So Krejcikova gets to put a lot of returns in play. I think that, that's not really going to be there against Dolehide. At the same time, when Krejcikova gets a full swing, I think Dolehei's going to make a lot of errors. Krejcikova is probably the more consistent player from the baseline. Well, not probably, but it's funny. I just picture Krejcikova losing to unforced errors only. So to call her consistent is risky. But I think she wins that in straight sets. Kudermetova, Navarro. Kudermetova's having a better time on grass. I still think Navarro wins. I think Navarro's defense is good enough to outlast her, and that's really been her MO on tour. She just really can grind a player down. Her defense is good, and she hits the ball big enough that if you do try to play possum with her, she will beat you. So she was down something like 3-0 early against Kvitova, but managed to turn that around pretty easily. I think Kvitova's retiring, so if she's listening, and of course she is, thank you, Petra. It's entertaining watching you play over the years. I love your elegant bird shrieks when you hit a shot. They make me think of beautiful eagles or something like that, or something more complimentary. Wang, in her best form, playing Sonmez Zeynep. I think Wang should win again. Zeynep is a solid player. And Wang can go off the rails, but she's been playing well for a couple weeks, so no real reason to say she's going to start missing now. Lamens, defeating the hype, beat Jovic. Jovic had some tape on her abs, so I don't want to make excuses for her, but it feels like she wasn't hitting the ball as big as she usually does. That kind of made it really tough against Lamens, who really was playing solid ball. Good win for Lamens. Good to see her getting wins on tour again. She'll be tough on Alexandrova. Alexandrova has a lot of offense, big serve, but balls going back in play can frustrate her into errors. So I think this one could be close. I like Alexandrova to win in 3, but it's a tricky spot. It's pretty common tennis equation, offense against defense, but I don't like predicting it. Yeah, I like Alexandrova in 3. Lamens beat Jovic, but there's nothing to really indicate that she's going to pull off a big upset here, other than, the first round level, which I'm not so sure of. If your opponent is not really hitting the ball that big, it's a lot easier for a baseliner to look really sharp, because there's no reason to miss. Elsa Jacquemot finished off Lynette. Probably should have won in straight sets. She was, she's serving for the first set as she was up 2 breaks. Still good to close out. Lynette, not exactly 100% physically. Jacquemot plays Bencic now. I think Bencic, even rusty, should win this match. I just think she is really good at hugging the baseline and trading power. And I think Elsa plays better with time. So even though the serve is going to get her a lot of cheap points because Bencic hasn't really been playing that often, I think Bencic should win in 2. It just feels like she's a good counterpuncher, and Jacquemot is not the best mover. Cocciaretto maybe played the best level of anyone except Anisimova in the first round. Pegula has a lot of classic big losses, but this wasn't one of them. Elisabetta just beat her straight up, just constant power and winners. I definitely like her to beat Volinets, even though Volinets pulled off a good win against Tatiana Maria. It's still like I can't say enough about how well. I thought I was going to tune in and see burnt out Pegula, struggling after a big title run, but Cocciaretto was just crushing the ball and just didn't blink. She was reading a book before the game, whatever book that was. I would like to read it. I'll read a book. Let me get a book. Swiatek, had a tough time in the first set, but straight set win is a straight set win. McNally played really well against Burridge. Didn't really see that one coming. I guess, McNally was a bit better than her when she was on tour, so it's possible. I think she poses a similar threat to Kudermetova, and, Swiatek is playing well. She should solve that puzzle. I don't like grinders against Swiatek. I feel like only like the big offenses can really upend her or frustrate her. Collins with a good win. Erjavec played great. She was down a set and a break, got the break back, and Kostyuk just kind of imploded again. She just started missing and kept missing. And Erjavec plays well, plays pretty solid, hits the ball well off both wings. She has a bright future, but I don't think Kostyuk needed to lose this match. It's another one in this stretch of just matches where she just looked frustrated and unwilling to grind. So I think Collins is willing to grind, even though she's not the best on grass. I think that she can outduel the younger player. Just has a bit more power, a bit more aggressive returning too. Erjavec doesn't have the biggest serve, so she really beat Kostyuk from the baseline, and I think Collins is going to be tough in that spot. So I think Collins wins that in 2 or 3. Towson and Kalinskaya is a tough spot. Towson looked rough in the heat against Watson. It didn't look like she was really totally physically comfortable. She was still able to crush the ball, still served big, but I think that's something to keep an eye on as things go. Kalinskaya is going to make you play a ton of tennis, and I think she might wear her down. It's tough because she's been injured for so long. It's really tough to just say she's going to win. But that's kind of where I'm at. It's dumb, right, to say that an injured player is going to outlast somebody. But I think if she's okay, her particular style of game is going to give Towson trouble. Zachary wins a match. It's good to see. Her and Rybakina is a good matchup. Elena's just serving too well right now. I think she's going to go deep in the draw. So, Zachary's it's good for TV, but I don't think she has a real chance to win unless there's a major implosion in Rybakina's game. Like, I'll put it this way. If Zachary can win that match, she probably has to hit a level that makes her one of the favorites to win the tournament, and I just don't see that happening. Kasatkina Begu is tricky. Kasatkina is really not that great on grass. Begu hit the ball really, really well against Kaja Juvan. She could win. I think it would take 2 or 3 sets. Well, I think it would take 3 sets, but it's a tough equation. I compared this to one of the men's matches. I compared it to De Minaur and Cazot. I think this one's a little different because Kasatkina doesn't really have a huge offense. Like, I don't think there's going to be a point where Begu is out of the points. Stamina-wise, she should be okay. It's going to be cooler conditions. And Begu just has a little more power. So I think that one's going to be tricky. I think Begu is going to win in 3. Samsonova beaten joint, last week's hero. This happened all across both draws. Whoever's been doing well on grass just came in and crashed out. And, I guess it's a focus and stamina and burnout issue. And, the other players it's easy when you're out in the first or second round to be sharp. Not exactly what happened with Samsonova, but if you've been losing first round for a couple months, yeah, you're suffering in the rankings and mentally, but you're having a lot more time to train and practice. So, at some point you're going to show up sharper than your opponent if you're similar levels. Samsonova's been playing great, though. So she won that. Should beat Stara Dubtseva. Stara really came back well against Jones and just locked into a level of hitting that Jones couldn't match. Felt like Stara's weight of shot really won her that match. I don't think it will against Samsonova. Might get some errors, but Samsonova's, serve and forehand are a bit too big. I think the upset is possible for Buzas Monero against Kenin. Really unfortunate. Seidel fell and hurt her ankle against Buzas in the second set. Had to withdraw. She was having a good tournament and qualified, so hopefully she's back soon. Buzas just has a way of winning matches. She doesn't really serve huge, nothing crazy or remarkable about her game, but everything is good. She moves well. She has a lot of variety. Doesn't really have a defined game, basically. She's just a really good player. I might compare her to like Andreescu or Garland, where they make the right decisions, they do what they have to do, and they're able to do everything. It looks pretty smooth, overall. Kenin, more tactical, more accurate, very, very much a clinician on the court. I think it'll be close. Kenin's been playing better lately. She should win the match. But, Buzis has shown the ability to elevate in big moments. So that one I think will be very tricky. I'd like Kenin, I guess, in 3. Zakharova, honestly, tuned in, and she has trouble, with double faults. She has trouble holding serve. But what I realized from watching her against Azarenka is that grass just gives her ground strokes that much more pace. She goes for a big winner on almost every shot where she has time to. And, on hard court or clay, the ball comes back a little bit, so she'll make some errors. She'll drop some sets. But here, the ball just doesn't come back. When she takes her backhand down the line and it lands deep, you don't get a play on it. I mean, Azarenka's certainly different. Vika's probably lost a third of a step, this season. Still a great win for Zakharova, and it will be hard for Yastremska to defend against her when she has time. Yastremska definitely can be rushed by power. She'll just try to hit just as hard right back at you, so she'll make errors. In the match against Goff, you saw a lot of Goff serves. Yastremska was late on the shot, and she just swung hard anyway and hit like the side of the bottom of the net a number of times. Really the only thing she did wrong there, though. It was a great match. She played effectively. She kept the ball on Goff's forehand with her forehand almost every time she could. When she was in trouble, I thought it was really smart that she did that. She hit a lot of looping forehands, across court, just to kind of buy time, because Goff is less dangerous on that wing. I will say that Goff hits her forehand cross really well at times off that. She doesn't really take it down the line. And when she does, I think because it's a very, very Western grip, I think she kind of shows you that she's going to go down the line, when she's trying to make that shot. And she doesn't really hit it for a great effect, The inside out, yeah, she'll go over the ball and hit that outside spin. But when she's just guiding the ball down the line, that's exactly what she's doing. She's just guiding it. So felt like Yastremska got to spend the day, in the corners hitting rather than having to guess which shot was coming. Goff just played a bad match. It does happen. She just won Roland Garros. Didn't really have a lot of prep for this event. Obviously no excuses. She fought hard in the first set. Could have won. But, all credit to Yastremska. She played a great match. She hit the ball really hard. Stayed composed. I really like the relationship with her box right now. That forget the guy's name. I will look it up. And you will have to wait, unfortunately. Because maybe I won't look it up. Yeah, sorry. Well, I guess you can't see what's going on. I was looking it up on my laptop, but I didn't have, wasn't online, so just turned on my hotspot for a moment. Are you enjoying the dead air? Okay, Emmanuel Huisner, I think is how you pronounce it, and Marcus Garutz as her technical coach. Yeah, but anyway, long story short, really good relationship. He kept her grounded. It's a player who you know, she plays a volatile style of tennis, so she can get frustrated out there. But he really kept her composed in a, you know, what's probably the biggest moment of her career. So, you know, absolutely great win for her. And she should beat Zakharova.